So the flip side of meeting someone I haven't ever met for 17 years and reconnecting with people who I have met is meeting brand new people interested in Miller. Jakub Kloza, very talented undergraduate student, so a bachelor student, is ready to give his fresh new thoughts on Miller. Thank you.
So I'm going to start with a photo of Henry Miller, who, when writing about Honoré Balzac, noted that the death and disintegration which Balzac sensed over a century ago has now seemingly reached its maximum. I'm convinced that these words are insightful nowadays, and I think they also can be applied to Miller himself. Marshall Berman, in his book What is Solid Melts to the Air, proposes something similar when writing about the idea of an empathetic return to modernism, because people at the end of 19th century and beginning of the 20th centuries began to observe changes that now are inherent part of our everyday lives. This is of course the case with Miller, but I think he was not only an attentive observer, for example, of the crisis of the self, capitalism, and the instrumentalization of human labor, the generation of sexuality. For me, Miller is above all a writer who faces with the challenges of the secular age, to use Charles Taylor's famous term, which refers to our reality when being religious, on believing, isn't a rule, but is a choice, an option, rather not easy option. And for these reasons, I consider Miller's most important book to be, of course, the Colossus of Maroussi. And I wanted to show you Polish editions. This green is first Polish edition and translation from 1976. And the blue one is the newest edition. And this English edition on the left is a book from which I am quotating. I think Colossus of Maroussi is a book which can be opened at any page and delight the reader every time, enriching us somehow. And some researchers have concluded that there is something like some kind of magic behind it. For example, in his book, Orpheus in Brooklyn, Bertrand Mathieu was the first to ask what really lies behind this magic, what literary and poetic devices are used. And my presentation, I intend to follow this path, but unlike Mathieu, who confronts Miller with Rimbaud, Orphic tradition, and poetic of illumination, because I intend to compare Miller with other writers important to him, Proust and Joyce, and mainly poetics of Epiphany. And I hope that something interesting will come of it. So let's start. I am speaking from a reader's point of view, and first and foremost impression from this book is a large number of references to light. Miller even calls his entire journey a voyage into the light, and therefore also his book. This motif or topic usually appears in moments of epiphany, and I'm not going to describe this term yet, because I want to show you how Miller understands it in his book. And let's go with the first quote. The rain has stopped, the clouds have broken, the vault of blue spreads out like a fan, the blue decomposing into that ultimate violet light, which makes everything Greek seem holy, neutral, and familiar. The association of light and divinity is well known, for example, from confessions of Saint Augustine and various mystical texts. In mirror's case, it refers to an unidentified sacredness which is present in everyday life and can be perceived at an opportune moment. It's kairotic, if I can mix somehow these two, Christian and Greek tradition. The theme of conversion is also important here, because sun comes out after the rain, and Miller develops this topic in second quote. Light acquires a transcendental quality. It is not the light of the Mediterranean alone, it is something more, something unfathomable, something holy. Here the light penetrates directly to the soul, opens the doors and windows of the heart, makes one naked, exposed, isolated in a metaphysical bliss which makes everything clear without being known. No analysis can go in this light. Here the neurotic is either instantly healed or goes mad. Here we have the use of light as an epistemological metaphor, because clear vision provides to knowledge, also self-knowledge, but the most important fact for me is that Miller, by giving us this definition of light and its power, is very close to the etymological meaning of epiphany, because Greek word epiphaneia means to reveal, to show, to manifest. Yeah, let's go further. When examining epiphanic poetics, we must also be mindful of how time is described. It's very important. And first quote, "For as I stood there daydreaming, I had the impression that everything was at a standstill, that I was not a man living in the 20th century, but a visitor from no century, seeing what he had seen before and would see again and again. And the thought that might be possible was utterly depressing." By the way, I use these colors in my presentation to show ambiguity present in Miller's epiphanies, which are momentary and so easy to annihilate. Yeah, but in this fragment, for Miller, we can see Greece becomes a space for, I would say, epiphanies of the past. By visiting Eleusis, Epidauros, Mykenae, Miller experiences all past events here and now. Katsimbalis and Seferis also help him in this by storytelling, by their stories. The experience of time then becomes complicated. The past isn't closed, which gives a feeling of a certain timelessness, like here. In Greece, one is ever filled with the sense of eternality, which is expressed in the here and now. The moment one returns to the Western world, whether in Europe or America, this feeling of body, of eternality, of incarnated spirit is shattered. But I think the most important is that Miller, as a visitor from no century, is also able to say, a light year is no more impressive to me than a second or a split second. So the feeling of eternality isn't based on a transcendental faith or on forgetting about temporality. It's completely different. On the contrary, stepping out of time is achieved through time, even for a fraction of a second or a split second, as Miller says. Miller was certainly familiar with Zarathustra's parable about the Augenblick Gate, located between the past and the future, and the man who stands in it is the master of time, because he is able to use knowledge of the past and anticipate what is yet to come. That's interpretation made by Martin Heidegger. Of course, experience of Kairos, understood as a convenient moment, convenient time, may also be taken into account when we look how time is transgressed in Miller's book. But now I really want to focus on what is crucial to genealogy of modern epiphany, and it's of course language, and we should remember about its philosophical romantic sources. By the way, there is no need to mention that some scholars are in favor of including Miller in the line of post-romantic writers. Since the Romantic era, epiphany has been associated with the unusual use of language, different from ordinary reference. This has been proven in research, for example, by Mayer Abrams or Charles Taylor. The language of Romantic poetry is intended to create something that did not exist before, to form new connections, to sparkle rather than reflect, to use this Mayer Abrams contradiction. Now let's see what Miller has to say about the literary language. Here he quotes Katsimbali's statement. Katsimbalis says, "But you don't use that language anymore." He says that about English language. "That's a dead language now. The language hasn't any guts today. You are all castrated, you've become businessmen, engineers, technicians. It sounds like wooden money dropping into a sewer. We've got a language, we're still making it. It's a language for poets, not for shopkeepers." What is important here is this contrast between English and Greek. First one, English is consistent. It reminds wooden money, which are completely exchangeable, exactly like signifi and signifio, to use this structuralist concept. On the contrary, Greek language is alive. Poets can develop it and say what has not yet been said. I am sure that Miller was agreeing with Katsimbalis because he was a poet in a broader sense, what emphasizes Mathieu, for instance. A few pages later, Miller expands on this idea, and here we go, longer quote, but I think it's one of the most beautiful fragments in the whole book, and maybe one of the most important even. So, if out of clay such an abstract medium as words can be shaped, what is to hinder us from leaving our bodies at will and taking up our abode on other planets or between the planets? What is to prevent us from rearranging all life, atomic, molecular, corporeal, stellar, divine? Why should we stop at words or at planets or at divinity? Who or what is powerful enough to eradicate this miraculous leaven which we bear within us like a seed, and which, after we have embraced it in our mind, all the universe, is nothing more than a seed, since to say universe is as easy as to say seed, and we have yet to say greater things, things beyond saying, things limitless and inconceivable, things which no trick of language can encompass. This fragment is so rich, but my comment will be short. Charles Taylor described the same way of thinking about language in his book Cosmic Connections, where he looks at how poets try to re-establish the broken connection between language and the world by using poetry as a way to experience epiphany of being. Miller is one of those poets. I want to show you that epiphanic thinking of Miller is complexible and somehow meta-reflective, which also applies to the art of storytelling. So let's start with a short quote. Miller says, "In the case of Katsimbalis, there was a quality which, as a writer, I feel to be of the most importance where the art of storytelling is concerned, the complete disregard of the element of time." Sorry for these misspellings in my presentation, because copy and paste, and that's the result sometimes. We can compare this statement to the metaphor of storytelling, which Miller gave us in context of Katsimbalis, because when Katsimbalis tells a story, he does it as if he were falling into a deep well and had to climb off it. And this structure is very important, leaving the world and returning, but returning after a transformation. This is the core structure of Epiphany, which is also meant to affect the reader, to transport them somewhere else. Like here, Miller says, I have always felt that the art of telling a story consists in so stimulating the listener's imagination that he drowns himself in his own reveries long before the end. And now I want to move to what is the heart of my presentation, so rhetoric of modern epiphany. And of course, one of the most important figures in the story of modern epiphany is James Joyce, who was the first to use that term epiphany, in its secularized version. In his view, or rather in his works, epiphany is a system of loosely associated concepts and images. The experience of epiphany in Joyce's works refers to momentariness and quickly ends in disillusionment, as in the portrait of an artist as a young man, where a series of epiphanies, religious, spiritual, romantic, for example, are shown to be an illusion at the end of each chapter. Thanks to its avant-garde background, Miller is also approaching these poetics. For example, here, when he's trying to describe what Saturn really is. Saturn is a living symbol of gloom, morbidity, disaster, fatality, so on and so on. I will skip that and go to the end. Like killing one's best friend accidentally, dying of hikers instead of on the battlefield, and so on ad infinitum. It can be argued, in my view, that Miller's poetic of enumeration is not linked to the postmodern crisis of reference, as in Joyce's case, because the infinity mentioned at the end of this fragment doesn't seem to be a sign of an arbitrariness of meanings, but rather a sign of an infiniteness and richness of meaning. And now let's move to the conclusion. Having said that, we can distinguish Miller's epiphanies from Joyce's. For Miller, epiphany isn't linked to disillusionment. It still can have potential to convert. Although it doesn't refer to any orthodox divinity, it doesn't close itself off to the experience of the sacred. Miller also doesn't follow Proust's path, because Proust creates a philosophical system of immutable essence accessible through epiphanies, such as the one with the Madeleine, for example. Miller is far off creating a philosophical system. So I would like to argue that Miller develops his own epiphanic poetics, which allows him to be considered one of the most important writers of the epiphanic trend in global modernism, trend which might be so inspiring nowadays. Thank you.